everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. I'm Raffi, as always, joined by Theodore and Davian. We have a full set today. I am rocking the classic wired earbuds because unfortunately I lost my AirPods, but that's a story for another day. I know how Theodore must be doing because obviously this past weekend did not go too well for him. But Davian, how are you before we get into Theodore's therapy session on this podcast?
Well, see, Cornell has yet to have college football. And I see all my friends posting how they're at game day and whatnot, and it makes me cry a little bit inside. But beyond that, I've been all right. The Patriots, they did okay. We'll talk about them more later. They did okay. I mean, Theodore, I'm not as bad as Theodore, so.
How are you, bud? Anything happened this past weekend that you want to talk about?
Let's talk about Alabama women's soccer. Huh?
I can think about
Alabama women's soccer. For those of you who don't know, I'm become the beat reporter for Alabama women's soccer, and they're the highest ranked team in all of Tuscaloosa. They're number 7 in the nation. They're just tied with UNC, and I can talk about them for hours, but that's not what you all want to hear. Jalen Milroe, come on, my guy. Yikes, that was a bad game to watch. I mean, look, I was in the heart of the student section, and we were depressed for that whole first half. I almost fell asleep watching it. Second half, Alabama, Texas, I kept thinking we were going to mount a comeback. Everyone did. We scored a touchdown, to cut it to 4 midway through the fourth quarter. They played Dixieland Delight. The whole place was rocking. We're yelling out, fuck Texas, we were so loud. We were so excited, and then their offense just marches down the field and puts the game away, and then Milroe throws a pick, and it's just, man, I feel bad, Jalen Milroe and Daniel Jones, because this is a transition into the Giants, which you also want to hear me talk about. They really were in the same position this past weekend because both of them were running for their lives. Daniel Jones a little more, where he had absolutely zero protection. And at least, Alabama was part of a competitive game. But at the end of the day, I mean, as both a Giants fan and Alabama fan, I was expecting to get to see 2 really, really fun seasons. And now it's looking like both teams might drastically underachieve. So just smile and look at the camera, right?
So let's first get into college football talk, though, before we get into the NFL and talk further about the Giants getting absolutely smacked by them boys. Theodore just got whacked by Texas this past weekend, so I'm sure Texas has moved down on his state power rankings of which states he plans on moving to potentially when he's older. Probably going to just stay in Alabama, but I wouldn't be shocked. Anywho, I thought Milroe wasn't bad for at least the first half. I didn't think he was terrible. I think he made a couple mistakes, but I think that can also just be classified as new quarterback, big game, etc. You normally don't see that from Alabama quarterbacks, but I don't think it's the end of the world. I didn't think he was terrible. The second half was not good for him. I thought, as you were saying, Theodore, he was absolutely running for his life. Quinn Ewers, I just want to say, right out there, I knew that Texas, this was going to be a big game. This was going to make or break Texas' season. And although I will still say that, next week they still need to win. That's the big thing, because Texas, as we've seen in the years past, they'll get a good win, they'll go crazy, and then they'll lose the next week or lose in 2 weeks and completely just throw the entire season. You need to keep the momentum if you're Texas. I loved how aggressive Steve Sarkisian was throughout the entire game. If there was a 4th down and they were in pretty solid field position, he went for it. He was very, very aggressive with his play calling, and I think that was a key reason why Texas beat Alabama. But yeah, Alabama overall, though, I thought they played a really good game. I love Steve Sarkisian's play calling. I know, Theodore, as you mentioned, Milroe had a rough night as a whole, and a lot could be blamed on the offensive line. I didn't think he was too bad in the first half, though. And I think in the second half, he had some good throws, but overall, just overcoming the offensive line issues was a big thing. And so I agree with you there. I think we still need to mention that Quinn Ewers balled out. As I mentioned, Steve Sarkisian did a great job with his play calling as a whole. I really liked his aggressiveness. Whenever they were in a 4th down situation with good field position, he always went for it. He was very aggressive as a whole. As you guys are showing, I don't even want to get into what you guys are showing. But anyways, I thought that Alabama, this isn't the end of the world for Alabama, but I'm concerned, though, overall with where Alabama's going to go from this. My big thing with Texas, can they use this as momentum throughout the rest of the season? I said this was going to be a big game 2 weeks ago, and now the hope is that Texas will not disappoint people once again. Texas might be back, but if they can continue to win out, I think that they have a favorable Big 12 that they can certainly win. Unless Oregon comes in and Texas
you can't forget about Oregon. Seriously, though, I was really
the tide will continue to roll. That's all I'm gonna say.
I agree, David.
I would also like to say, out of everybody here, my school is the only school to have not lost a football game this weekend. All right, so out to all of you guys. I want to talk about what everyone's talking about. Colorado.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Deion Sanders. It's prime time. It's Boulder season. I'm sorry. I'm getting really annoyed with them. I'm going to be honest. I had this conversation with a friend today where I'm like starting to really go off the hype train. I thought week 1, it was impressive to see what I saw. I thought week 2, they played well, but they didn't play astronomically well for them to get like another week of national television news again on Saturday. I'm not buying in on this Colorado team is going to be like, people are starting to talk about like the college football playoffs. Like, no, they're far and beyond away from that. They've played mediocre competition so far, right? TCU is just not the team that we expected them to be. All right. Nebraska is like a mid Big Ten team at best. All right. If you want to talk about Big Ten football, Michigan. But also, I want to talk about Maryland football. They've been playing pretty well. And I think that, we should definitely watch out for them to potentially have a few spoilers, potentially against Ohio State or Penn State. I know that's a bold take, but yeah. Beyond that, nothing else really kind of shocked me this weekend. I guess UNC's underperformance, but I feel like that kind of always happens. Like UNC always underperforms at some point. LSU really got angry this weekend. Damn, they really took it out all out on this weekend. Florida State kind of did what Florida State usually does. Beyond that, there wasn't anything that really popped out to me per se.
I won't even be like just keep these thoughts to myself because I really am a certified hater of the Colorado Buffaloes. I am a hater. Say what you want. I am a hater. TCU is your classic example of a team that does really well, makes college football playoff, or gets very high ranked last year, loses a lot of high-end talent. You lose Duggan, you lose Johnson, you lose multiple members on the offense and the defensive side of things for TCU, but they still get ranked just because of their past success the last year. We saw what happened. They played a tight game versus Colorado. Colorado wins a tight game. Okay, congratulations. I did not watch the second half versus Nebraska, or the Colorado-Nebraska game, but I watched the first half, and that first half was awful. It was terrible. You should not be allowed anywhere near the top 25 if you are struggling, if you have not blown out Nebraska by the end of the first quarter, by the end of the first half. It was terrible. They could not get anything going on offense. It was an absolute tank bowl. You can't even tank in college football. I'm sorry, but I'm a hater on the Colorado Buffaloes, and I will fully embrace it. They are overrated, and they will get put in their place when they play Oregon in 2 weeks.
I completely disagree, Raffi. I think that I am at this point fully on the Deion Sanders hype train. Now, I had my doubts at first. I really did. And at the end of the day, are TCU or Nebraska really good teams? No, they're not. Are they probably going to lose to Oregon, Utah, USC, etc.? Yeah, they'll probably lose most of those games. But the fact of the matter is, Deion Sanders is a transcendental figure. He is the future of coaching in college football. And that may be a reach to say that after, 2 games in FBS. But I fully believe I've seen enough to say that. I also fully believe that eventually, when Nick Saban calls it quits at Alabama, I want Deion Sanders to be the man to take over the Crimson Tide.
Davian, the Cowboys just smacked the Giants so hard they knocked out Theodore, and now he's gone delusional, full-blown delusion. Okay. I do want to mention though, Pac-12 for their final year, let's be straight up here. It's
Really
going to be
good.
an absolute gauntlet and a half. You have
Yeah.
USC at 5 right now. Washington's at 8. You have Utah at 12. Oregon at 13. Oregon State at 16. Colorado, I have again, but still they're at 18. They're ranked. My point is the rankings. Washington State, I love seeing the flag every week on College Game Day at 23, and then you have UCLA at 24. A lot of these teams as well have very solid quarterbacks. Arguably, if you were to list like the top 10 quarterbacks in college football, at least half of them are from the Pac-12 this year. The Pac-12 is going to be an absolute gauntlet and a half this year, and it's going to be really fun to watch.
I agree with that. I do want to say one thing. Like I did kind of talk bad about the Buffaloes just now, but I think Deion Sanders is kind of the future of college coaching. And the reason why I say this is just the way that he brought a complete culture shock to this team. He brought in a new culture, and he said, you're either buying in with me or you're leaving. And that's exactly what he did. There were so many players that ended up leaving in the transfer portal, and everyone was like, that's it, this team is done. But he really kind of got it straight. Also, it's the fact that like he's coaching his son, right? So there's like definitely a connection and a bond there where his son can kind of bring forth the culture that his dad, like Deion Sanders, is trying to bring in. So in that sense, I think that this is a team that, look, this is a team that won 10 last year, right?
Yeah.
They did terrible last year, right? They're 2-0. They beat mediocre opponents, but if we look back at this time last year, they would have been getting blown out by TCU. They would have been getting blown out by a team like Nebraska. I'm given that like if TCU this year played the Buffaloes of last year, TCU would have blown them out. That's what I'm trying to state.
I just think it's ridiculous though, because Mel Kiper put Sanders all the way up to his QB3. He's like, oh, he's high first round.
He's not. He's not QB3, but
I need to see more. Like we can't just. Okay. I feel like there's a difference between giving Colorado their respect and saying, okay, they're a 2-0 team. They've definitely improved things. Deion Sanders is doing a good job. Versus everyone just being enamored with everything that happens. Like Deion Sanders could drop a QB sneak on the 1-yard line to score a touchdown, and people are going to be like, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of this? This is genius coaching. I love Sanders, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, I personally.
Raffi, usually I agree with you because we've talked about how like the media and like ESPN and all that will like just completely obsess over certain figures, right? And notably we had this with LeBron. This is one where I completely think everything they're saying is warranted. I just think that you look at college football right now, there is no bigger story than Deion Sanders. The fact of the matter is, 8.7 million people tuned in to watch Colorado play Nebraska. That's the exact same amount that watched the Alabama-Texas game, one of the biggest regular season matchups we've had in years. The fact of the matter is there is nothing that really compares at all to what's going on in Colorado. And I am very, very excited to see how this year plays out.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, look, this week, like, I think I look at college football, I think this week, and the matchups, they're not great, I would say. I think week 4 is when it starts really getting interesting. You have, like, ranked opponents going against other ranked opponents. Any games that you guys would say to look out for? Any games that you guys are looking out to see the performance, see if, like, the team is actually legit or not? Like, we have I don't really know, like, what ranked. Yeah, there isn't many like ranked games.
I just want to say one other thing before we move on. If you guys want to give your games that are of importance, absolutely go for it. I think it's very clear now after week 0 or week 1, whatever the first week is, when Florida State played LSU. I just think it's very clear that Florida State is winning the ACC. Miami looked good versus A&M last week, but I really think that this is Florida State's year. Clemson was not good at all versus Duke.
Yeah.
Yes, they played great last week, but then again, when you play a team that I can't even remember who you played, that says something about, like, I personally don't care. So Clemson losing week 1 was definitely concerning for me, and I think Florida State is going to be winning the ACC this year.
I don't know about that, Raffi. I really like Mario Cristobal as a coach. I think he did a great job at Oregon. I think he's doing a great job in Miami. And I think this will be a down-to-the-wire race between these two squads. I think Florida State is the better team. I think they probably will win the conference. I think they'll have a chance at the college football playoff, but I would not write off Miami that quickly.
Yeah, we'll see. Miami's still a good team. Not discounting that at all, but obviously we'll see what happens. There's a lot that can change. Moving on to more football talk, but this time at the professional level. Week 1 was this past weekend, and I know to some people on this podcast, they wish that last week was the preseason still, because there were certainly some teams that didn't show out too well. Before we get into some of the teams that surprised, did well, underwhelmed, etc., some of the big news, Aaron Rodgers potentially might be a big story for us to talk about. I want to talk about the Falcons real quick, because the Falcons played very iffy in the first half. I was a little concerned, but then, the second half was amazing. Desmond Ridder, a lot of people are just dogging on him for no reason. He did all he has to do, and that's just not be Marcus Mariota. As long as you're better than Marcus Mariota, that's all Desmond Ridder has to do. I thought he played a great game. Bijan Robinson is a dog. He's great. Love him. Tyler Algier, another dog. Jesse Bates, the only thing that the Falcons should have done better this offseason was paid Jesse Bates more money, because he was amazing. 1 forced fumble, 2 picks. I said in our group chat that the Falcons are winning the Super Bowl. I will walk back that statement because that was a time of delusion. But I will say, I think the Falcons, if they can continue to improve on both sides of the ball as the season goes on, I really do think this team could win the NFC South pretty nicely, potentially. But then again, it's the Atlanta Falcons. So knowing this, they're going to lose their next 4 weeks.
The Bucs. The Bucs are not a bad team. I just want to say that. They beat a Minnesota Vikings team, bad, which Theodore said would be the best in the NFL, which they're clearly not, first off. But the Buccaneers won, and they're a good team. Baker did what Baker needed to do. Mike Evans was Mike Evans, as per usual. So, honestly, it's going to be a bit of a competitive NFC South. I will say that much. Other than that, no surprise in the 49ers Steelers. I said that the Steelers were like a bad team. The 49ers absolutely obliterated them. No surprise there.
I was so shocked by that. I really was, because I was expecting the Steelers to take a step up this year. And obviously luckily there's still 17 weeks for the Steelers to prove themselves. But that was just pure domination by the Niners. Yeah. And there was some concern to Brock Purdy. Okay, like, is he just a guy who can just step in, win some games like a Jimmy Garoppolo? Or is this guy like an actual guy? And I think we saw this past week that he is a guy. And the Niners, after week 1, if we want to do a week 1 overreaction, the Niners might be the best team by far in the NFC and play whoever comes out of the AFC gauntlet in the Super Bowl. But that's an overreaction. But I don't think it's too far-fetched too. Yeah. But Davian, continue.
Furthermore, the Commanders, a good team. Sam Howell did what he needed to do. I can't really say that against the Cardinals, who were starting Josh Dobbs, who actually didn't play too bad. I remember watching him back in his Tennessee days, so he's actually a solid player.
Josh Dobbs played better than Joe Burrow. Just know that. Just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Because Joe Burrow got paid, and then he just nothing.
Guys, hold on. We are completely missing the biggest shock of this weekend.
The Giants getting absolutely blown out. Oh yeah, that too.
Like, I think we need to talk about that real quick. The Lions are a really good team. Like, yes, fine, Chiefs didn't have Chris Jones or Travis Kelce, and I hate this notion that all of a sudden, like, this game is an asterisk and that the Lions are not that good. Like, that's such BS. That's just ESPN sucking up to the Chiefs as per usual. The Lions are a good team. I think I really see them potentially winning the NFC North. I know I said the Bears would win it, but the Bears did not show up to play against Jordan Love, which somehow he looked good, which, I'm just not a Packers fan. I guess you could see that.
The Packers showed out. But yeah, we do need to talk about the Lions a little bit more, because the Lions played a very good game versus the Chiefs. And again, Davian, I agree. There's always a narrative of, this guy was out. People are saying that, like, the Lions are the reason why the players were out. It's like the Lions, like, before the game, like, had like a crowbar and just like whacked the knees of Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. Like, now we can win the game. Like, the Lions were gonna play whoever the Chiefs lined up. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's still the Chiefs. And at the end of the day, too, it's Patrick Mahomes. The Lions beat a Patrick Mahomes, while healthy, Chiefs team. And that's the bottom line. The Lions look good. Once again, cautious optimism with a team like the Lions, like a team like the Falcons. Things can go off the rails. These teams may or may not be cursed. I'm just putting it out there. I believe in curses in sports. Let's pump the brakes, but this is obviously a big one for the Lions because it really sets the tone for this year. And David, as you mentioned, I think it's going to be big for them to keep that momentum going in an NFC North that I think that they certainly can win, especially after the Vikings pooped the bed. And the Bears fans, I know I'm from Chicago. I heard all off season the Bears are back. Justin Fields is going to ball out. The Bears are going to be a playoff team, etc. I understood. I got it. I love the Bears fans. I have nothing but respect for them.
Yeah.
But before I throw it over to you, Davian, the Bears had a chance this past weekend to really back themselves up and really get a lot of hype on that team. And to lose the way they did versus the Green Bay Packers, their biggest rival, if I was a Bears fan, I'd be very disappointed with how that went. You cannot talk so much this past offseason and then lose that badly to your rival.
Yeah. A few other things I want to take note. The Saints, they showed up to play. Ryan
yeah, so did the Titans. They both showed up, but they didn't do anything.
The Titans just did not. They just showed up. They weren't on the field, but they weren't playing. I do want to talk about the Colts, specifically Anthony Richardson. He impressed me this weekend.
He did, yeah.
First, your first game of your NFL career, you're going against a pretty good Jaguars team and defense, and he played well. I mean, he played, I think, really well, I guess you could say. Geno Smith and the Seahawks, I mean, as Geno Smith said, like, they just wanted it more. I think you could say that much. I know we don't really talk about fantasy football too much on this podcast, but Tutu Atwell had 15 targets. If you're looking for someone to pick up on the waiver wire, that's somebody you should look out for. If you're really in desperate needs of a QB, you could also pick up Zach Milf Hunter Wilson, which, speaking of, I want to say that he didn't play bad against the Bills, but also the Bills played bad. So I don't know if you could really say that much. Dolphins, Chargers, I know I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but I do want to talk about the Dolphins, Chargers. I really like that. I think that was the best game of this weekend. It was a really competitive game all the way to the end. I didn't watch it, but
See, people are saying, "Oh, Herbert, oh, Tua, they're both great quarterbacks." Let's just put that to bed. They're both great. We can agree that they're both good quarterbacks. You don't need to pick a side. At the end of the day, they're both amazing quarterbacks.
Yeah. Wilson sucked.
But the Chargers have cemented themselves still. They're cursed. That's the one team. If you're like Raffi, you can pick only one team to be cursed. I would potentially take the Minnesota Twins, but I'm absolutely taking the Chargers.
Raffi.
They're cursed. They're cursed. They're cursed.
There is literally a team that has been looking for a QB for 50 years. Just signed a Hall of Fame QB, top tier guy. 4 plays in, he tears his Achilles.
Yeah. See, the Jets.
You're telling me
they're
that's
rivalry.
not the most cursed team?
You tell me they're not cursed, bro?
There's a team more cursed than the Jets.
There can be multiple teams that are cursed. I'm not saying that, but if I had to pick one, it'd be the Chargers, just based off their history as a whole.
I saw a post the other day, like the Jets are the only team to have a Hall of Fame coach and a Hall of Fame QB for only a day. Bill Belichick, right? Remember, he signed for a day and ended up resigning. So I mean, one thing I will say, this is going back, right? We talk about Denver. We talk about the state of Colorado. You got 2 new coaches coming in, Deion Sanders, Sean Payton. And, there was a complete culture shock in both teams. But it doesn't seem like that worked out so much for the Broncos.
The more things change, the less they do.
I wouldn't write off Denver right away. Honestly.
I'm not going to write them off, but I wasn't impressed by the way they played. I mean, I was impressed by the Raiders because I thought they were going to be like terrible.
I think we all wrote off the Raiders in our NFL.
Yeah,
preview.
we really
I think that might have been a mistake.
Yeah,
I was slightly bullish on the Raiders.
You were not bullish. Come on, you had them finishing last in the division.
We all did.
I actually don't remember. We'll look at the tape and we'll go over it. But yes, let's give the Raiders their credit though. You guys can talk about the Raiders, so let's give them their fair.
Let's talk about. More importantly, let's talk about the fact that is Tom Brady going to be a New York Jet?
No.
Oh,
crazy to say this.
Is Philip Rivers going to be a Jet? Is a different question though.
Is one of Philip Rivers' kids going to be a New York Jet? That's the real question.
Is Colin Kaepernick going to be a Jet?
No. I'm not cutting that out, but that should absolutely be cut out, Davian. I'm very disappointed in you. But I think there's all this conversation now. I think it's clear Zach Wilson is going to get his. This is your last chance.
It's already
Zach
Wednesday.
Wilson.
They haven't signed anyone, so he's starting this weekend at least.
This is your last chance. If I'm talking to Zach Wilson, this is your last chance, bud. Otherwise, you are suiting up QB1 for, what is it, the Guangdong Tigers, whatever, the Shanghai Tigers. Anyways, Zach Wilson, this is your last chance. And he needs to play well. Otherwise, like, you have a perfect opportunity to take the starting QB role and at least, like Aaron Rodgers, if he comes back next year, doesn't retire, which probably because there's a ton of money, and I don't think Aaron Rodgers is just going to go out because of injury unless he just cannot play physically.
He'll make himself.
Zach Wilson, this is his tape this year to say, like, hey, I'm a guy. You guys could use my services, whatever team's out there. So, Zach Wilson, this is your big shot. I do, though, want to move on to one game that we have not talked about yet. And Theodore knows where I'm going with this. Theodore, you haven't talked too much during this segment, so I'm going to give you a chance now to talk a little bit about the New York Giants in a game where just right from the get-go, anything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It was a rough, rainy night at MetLife Stadium.
Theodore, explain to me
the Cowboys defense just absolutely just like thwarted the Giants for 60 minutes. Theodore.
Okay. So full disclosure, I did not watch the game. Yeah. I was covering a Bama soccer game that overlapped. However, I obviously had the game pulled up while covering the soccer game. The other reporter I was working with was a Cowboys fan. Ooh. It was not a fun experience. I saw our first kick get blocked, and from that point, I realized, okay, this is going to be a really long night. And then just following along, it looked horrible. I watched the highlights. I read some analysis, and I just don't get it. I seriously I'm at a loss, you know? What more, do we need to do? We made what should have been all the necessary adjustments. Okay, we could use some more, a little more talent on the O-line, but there was no excuse for it being that atrocious. I get that Micah Parsons is probably a top 5 overall player in the NFL, but there's just no reason that we just saw that happen. The one thing I will say, this is rock bottom. I mean, it does not get any worse than what we just saw. I mean, you look ahead of the schedule, there's some tough games on there, but Arizona Cardinals next week, that is the perfect chance to get back on track. So we're going to be 1-1, and we'll have some momentum going into a little bit of a gauntlet.
You'd have to imagine that's a must-win game, though, versus Arizona. You cannot lose that game versus Arizona and go 0-2. I've seen 0-2 teams you can still make the playoffs, but after how they got humiliated versus Dallas, you lose to Arizona. I think the season completely can derail itself going into that tough stretch. And then you look after
that game, Raffi, we got Niners, Seahawks, Dolphins, Bills, the next 4. The start of the season is a gauntlet. I mean, there is no other way to put it, considering that, 5 of our first 6 opponents are playoff teams from last year.
Yeah.
After that, it gets really, really easy. But if the season's already off the rails, if we're 2-4 or 1-5, there's not much that can be done. So
yeah, and I just want to take note. So there's a chance that this if the Giants lose to the Cardinals, there's a very good, it's a significant chance that the rest of the NFC East is 2-0. Eagles play the Vikings. Vikings underperformed last week. I mean, I want to touch on the Eagles as well. The Commanders play the Broncos. That's technically a winnable game for the Commanders. And then the Cowboys play the Jets.
Right.
So, right.
Yeah, I mean, we got to win this game. But at the end of the day, we will. I mean, we saw how bad Arizona was last week. We saw the fact that, we still have so much talent on this team. And I feel like this is kind of like, Alabama going out and playing Middle Tennessee in a way. This is just a nice, tune-up game, get everything flowing, and then it'll get us back on track, hopefully, for the rest of the season.
Yes, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I do want to talk about the Patriots. I think that's one team we have yet to talk about. I'm going to touch on them very quick. The first quarter was abysmal. I was watching with a Patriots fan here as well. He ended up leaving the little watch party that we had. I continued to watch in my room. I was impressed by a second quarter. Mac Jones was on fire.
Mhm.
Then came the halftime. It was bittersweet to see Brady out there, and how they announced he's going to get inducted to the Hall of Fame, or the Patriots Hall of Fame. And then really things picked up in the second half. I think this Patriots team has a lot of potential, and it's our secondary. I thought that's going to be our biggest weak point. Played pretty well, especially in the fourth quarter. The one thing is like the offense again. Like I'm not happy with the way that their game scheme. Why is Juju not out on the last drive? Why are we trying to trust a pair of rookies to try and clutch up the game when they can make stupid mistakes like Keon Boyta? I probably butchered his name just now. Not getting his second foot down in bounds. This Eagles team played well. I think they're a very good team. I think if the Eagles play the way they play in the first quarter often, this is a scary Eagles team. But beyond that, I mean, also realize that like the Eagles didn't play that great in the second half that well, so the Eagles aren't like a runaway team in the NFC East either.
See, I think the Eagles are another team kind of like the Vikings where I think a lot of people are still on the hype train with them, but I wouldn't be shocked if those two teams take step backs. The good thing though for both those teams is they're in the NFC, and although the NFC you have a lot of teams that might make the playoffs, a lot of teams have a lot of questions. So teams with less questions like the Vikings and Eagles, I still think can turn things around, get some good wins, and find themselves back as a true contender in the NFC. But once again, going back to what we were saying earlier, if the Niners just can keep playing like how they did versus the Steelers, if that's a sign of what's to come, the only thing that's going to take out the Niners is injuries. And speaking of injuries, before we end off the show, the Baltimore Ravens, J.K. Dobbins, I mean, it's awful. Again, we have unfortunately never really had the chance to see J.K. Dobbins in a full season in a couple weeks. It's really unfortunate to see how his career's unfolded. And it's just unfortunate because injuries happen and some people have more injuries than others. But you lose Staley, then I think Marcus Peters is also hurt too. And it just looks like the Ravens are continuing their cycle
Marcus
of
Peters
getting healthy and then they get injured right away at the start of the season. So we'll see what happens with the Baltimore Ravens.
Thoughts on the Browns, people? Are the Browns legit?
No.
Give me another week or two.
Let me say one thing though. I said it last week. I was not ready to write off Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. You guys laughed at me for saying this. I did.
That is true.
Yep, I remember.
I think that after what we just saw, Baker is back. You see the quote he just had, saying how he was able to figure out all of the signs of the Vikings defense, and then he made it even better by reassuring everyone that he's not an Astros fan. It was hilarious. This is peak Baker Mayfield. I mean, he's just such a fun guy. He's like a more controlled Johnny Manziel in a way.
Yeah, I was about to say, he's like what Johnny Manziel should have been.
When he is confident, he's good.
And he is confident.
I think it's just a matter of stacking those weeks together, as you're saying, Theodore. Because next week's versus the Bears. That's a winnable game. The Bears season also, again, speaking of big games, that Bears game. I think that week's gonna really define both team seasons. If the Bucs go in there and just stomp the Bears, I think the Bears season is immediately over. And I think Tampa, then you can start to be like, okay, this team in an NFC South where obviously I will continue to overhype the Falcons. There's an opening for the Bucs to be competitive throughout the entire season, if not fight for a playoff spot. So
the Saints,
Brownies.
Yeah, Raffi, the Saints did not look that good.
Sleeping on the Brownies.
The Saints will see because their defense is still good. So that's why I'm not putting the Saints to bed yet. Because also I like Derek Carr too. But we'll talk about this more in coming weeks. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Benchwarmer Sports Podcast. Obviously, Texas had its way with Theodore this past weekend. So hopefully Theodore stays a healthy distance away from the state of Texas for the next couple weeks. Theodore, take a vacation. I know you're in school, but you deserve it. For Theodore, for Davian, I'm Raffi. Once again, be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Be sure to follow us on TikTok, Benchwarmer_sports for more sports content. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. And we will see you next time. See ya.
Go Alabama girls soccer. Peace.
Yeah.